Good evening from Washington. I'm Larry O'Connor, and we begin tonight with the curious crime against Paul Pelosi, the husband of the Speaker of the House of the United States. Now, let me just be clear on the outset, we fully condemn this violent act against Mr. Pelosi. It's outrageous. I mean, a deranged lunatic beat him with a hammer, sent him to the hospital with a fractured skull. We're told that he will return to normal and fully recover, and thank God for that. We condemn this kind of violence outright, 100%. That should go without saying. But apparently it doesn't go without saying. Not in today's political climate. You see, in today's political climate, if you're a conservative, if you're on the right of the political spectrum, you are compelled to condemn such acts of violence. I mean, why we need to have to twist ourselves into pretzels and say, well, I condemn violence against the husband of Nancy Pelosi. I'll never quite understand it. Of course we condemn it. But if you don't condemn it, you're complicit. That's the narrative that's been built for us today, and frankly, that's what we have to talk about. We have a lot of questions about this crime. It's a very bizarre situation. We still have a whole lot of mystery surrounding this whole thing, why the police haven't been compelled, or reporters who first reported on this story haven't been compelled to come clean and tell us all the information they know. I'm not sure, maybe because it's an ongoing investigation. But let's begin with the report to the police that night from Mr. Pelosi's home.
A priority 910, 2640 Broadway, across of Scott and Normandy. I have a 14-hour copy. RP stated that there's a male in the home and that he's going to wait for his wife. RP stated that he doesn't know who the male is, but he advised that his name is David and that he is a friend. RP sounded somewhat confused. 12 over back and copy.
Units code 3 to 2640 Broadway for 14-hour.
Ever 12 over copy. 15-hour also code 3.
Ever 112 advice insufficient units on scene 2640 Broadway. Special call medic 66, location 2640 Broadway.
Yeah, so that's just part of the call, of course, but you got the initial report there. RP, by the way, stands for reporting person. That's Paul Pelosi. And you heard him say, RP says that there's a stranger in the house, that his name is David, he doesn't know who he is, and then says that he's a friend. And the dispatcher, police officer, says clearly RP is confused. Yeah. Paul Pelosi was definitely confused. We're confused. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. None of it, does it? When the police arrived, we're told that an unknown third person opened the door to let them in, but now we're told that there wasn't a third person who opened the door to let them in. So maybe Mr. Pelosi or the suspect in this case opened the door and let them in. But that doesn't make sense when you hear the next part of the story, where the police have reported that they saw Mr. Pelosi and the suspect holding a hammer. That was then changed to struggling over a hammer, and then the suspect won the struggle and started beating Mr. Pelosi with the hammer. All right, let's unpack this for a minute. If they're both struggling over a hammer, how did they open the door? And when the police got there and watched them struggling with the hammer, why didn't they, I don't know, intervene and stop the struggle? Instead, they just watched until the assailant actually ended up winning the struggle and started beating Mr. Pelosi with the hammer. That doesn't make sense either, does it? It doesn't. Also, one of the local news stations first reported that the suspect was wearing nothing but his underwear, but then that was retracted. But then the reporter hasn't explained where he got that story in the first place. Why not? That seems to be a weird thing to get wrong, doesn't it? Also, there's an image showing how this assailant got into the house in the first place. We're told that he broke a window of a French door and let himself in that way. By the way, they are probably the wealthiest family in San Francisco, the Pelosis, not to mention the fact that Mrs. Pelosi is in fact third in line for the White House. You'd think there would be some robust security in this house. Lots of cameras, not just at this house, but in the neighborhood. But so far we haven't seen that footage. All we see is this image of the broken window outside the French door. And well, there's an odd thing about it. Don't take my word for it. I've seen a lot of law enforcement professionals commenting on this. The glass from the broken window is on the outside of the house, not on the inside of the house. Now, I'm no physics wizard, but I've got to think when you break into a window, the glass, you know. So there's another question that we have. I mean, it's all very strange, isn't it? There's also one other aspect of Mr. Pelosi that hasn't come up in any of these stories, all the reporting on this event, and that is the fact, and it is a fact, that Mr. Pelosi has a serious substance abuse problem. We know this because just a few months ago, the first time any of us really had heard Mr. Pelosi's name in the media was when he was arrested for a drunk driving incident where he actually smashed into another car in Napa Valley. Also, by the way, there was supposedly a mysterious passenger in the car with Mr. Pelosi, but we've still never learned that person's identity. More questions. But here we are at 2 in the morning in San Francisco in his home. He calls 911. He says there's a stranger in the house. His name is David and he's a friend. And we know that he has an alcohol problem. Are we allowed to ask questions about all of these mysteries surrounding the event? No, we're not. Because apparently we're told in the last few months leading up to this attack, the suspect posted crazy right-wing conspiracy theory content on the internet. Now, we haven't been able to see it. Only the Washington Post has seen it before it got deleted, because you can't be trusted to see it. But we do have to trust the Washington Post and the rest of the media, who demands that you take exactly what they're telling you about this story as biblical scriptural truth. Because after all, when has the media ever gotten a story wrong? When have they ever lost your trust? Now, the reason why the right-wing conspiracy theory content is a big part of this story is because they want to blame you. They want to blame me for this attack on Paul Pelosi. Watch Rick Wilson.
And for this gigantic accretion of far-right, MAGA-right ecosystems that feed these people a steady diet of conspiracy theories, of insane falsehoods, of manipulation and information that any rational person would look at for 30 seconds, including you, Elon, referencing the Santa Monica Observer, which has previously told us that Hillary Clinton was dead. But this ecosystem feeds people with weak minds. It feeds people who are mentally unstable. And look, it looks like this guy may have had some serious mental health issues. It looks like he's a crazy person. But you know what? Crazy people go on the internet too. Crazy people watch cable TV too. Crazy people are fed this propaganda also. Throughout history, a lot of assassinations have been mentally ill people who were motivated and manipulated by much smarter people.
Yeah, apparently you're also responsible for the Kennedy assassination. Okay, Rick. Guess what? Those crazy people on the internet also read all of your blither about Russian collusion and a P-tape. So I'm going to ignore you for the rest of my life. That's Rick Wilson. But we've seen this story before. Over a decade ago, Congresswoman Gabby Giffords out of Tucson, Arizona, was shot by a deranged lunatic. It was a horrible, tragic story that captured the nation's imagination. But within 12 hours, we were told that Sarah Palin was responsible for that assault on Gabby Giffords. Or if it wasn't Sarah Palin's fault, it was Glenn Beck's fault. But of course, that was also a revival of a story that we saw all the way back from the Oklahoma City bombing. Back in the Oklahoma City bombing in the 90s, that was the fault of Rush Limbaugh. It's all the same story and it's all the same tactic. They want to shut you up. They want to stop you from not only believing what you're believing, but voicing your opinions. Let me just be clear. You believing what you believe and expressing your political opinion, no matter how passionately and vociferously you express it, does not mean you are responsible for the violent acts of a lunatic. Now, that should also go without saying, but we're living in the left's America, and so there, I've said it.